Hey everybody, and welcome to yet another episode of D&D Horror Stories. In today's video, we have a story about a that guy attacking a 16-year-old DM that gets his just desserts. A tale about a player that takes a perception check way too seriously, and much more. But first, it's the part in the video where I use cats to try to get you to subscribe if you haven't already. And with that done, let's get right into these stories. The Time My Brother Had to Fight a Problem Player by Reddit user Loth the Drow. So, this story took place about 2 years ago. At the time, I was just starting out as a new GM, and was one of the only other girls in the store. I was also 16 at the time. Now, I want to give some backstory on my brother first. He isn't a violent person at all. In fact, he is a big teddy bear with the beard to match. For reference, he is 6'5" and used to be a footballer, before he had a leg injury and picked up painting models, as well as playing tabletop games. He was the one who got me into D&D. Now for the story. My brother had told me about a new group of players who were looking for a GM at his local game shop. So later that day, we went down and he introduced me to the players. 2 of them were new to the store. There was another 16-year-old by the name of Max, not his real name, and then his girlfriend, Lily, who was a year older. The other one was Ben, who was 18. He was one of my brother's classmates, who got him into Warhammer. We were all starting to talk about doing Lost Mines of Phandelver, and were making plans when the problem player showed up and asked if he could join. His name was Kevin. Now, my brother did know Kevin. He told me later in the car ride home that he was a power gamer, but at the time, I wanted to be nice, so I said that he could join before leaving. We all made a plan to meet up next Sunday. So, session 0 through 2. My brother and I got there about 30 minutes early. My brother helped me set up everything and said that if I needed help reading the rules or if I had a question about them, he would be over at the painting table. The local game shop was split up into painting and playing rooms, and there was a window between them. So the start time comes up, and Ben, Max, and Lily all get there on time, and I was helping them make their characters. Ben was a human fighter, Lily was an elf cleric, and Max was a human wizard. About an hour passes, and then Kevin shows up, saying that he was sorry he was late, that he got held up in traffic. However, he said he made his character the night before, and that we could start. I asked to see his character sheet. When I saw his sheet, I got very confused because, 1, he wasn't playing a race in the player's handbook, a Tabaxi Bard, a rule I had set beforehand because I didn't have all the books, and all but one stat had an 18 in it. When I asked how he got all of them, he said he rolled for his stats, to which I then reminded him that we were doing standard stat array. I asked him to please change these things before we start, and after some arguing, he changed his race and stats to be a half-elf bard. Now, another rule I had at my table is that I don't want to do romance or any sexual stuff because it made me uncomfortable, and I didn't want to roleplay that at the time. All of them nodded their heads, but Kevin kinda seemed a bit more upset. Anyway, we start the game, and session 1 was good. They made their way into the goblin camp and managed to kill the first room, but we had to leave after that. The next session, they killed the goblins and were making their way to Phandelver. Then session 3 came up, and they get into town. All of them are following along with the story. However, Kevin's character says that he's going to the Sleeping Giant to get a drink. The players said that they would follow after they get some gear from the shops. So after their shopping trip, I cut back to Kevin and tell him about the bar and Grista, and how she's serving some old miners and some ruffians. Because I didn't want to start the whole Red Band ruffians fight just yet, I tell them that they were just drinking and being a bit loud. Kevin's character, on the other hand, didn't pay much attention to this, and went over to Grista and started to flirt with her, but in a way to get info about the quest, so I allowed it. I told him to roll, he got a 3, and I told him that she shows her wedding ring and says that he wasn't really her type, but thanks for making her day. He then says, "I used charm person to make her love me and kiss her. I said that I don't know if the spell works like that, and then texted my brother, who confirmed that it doesn't work like that, and that it only charms them as if you were being friendly, and that they would get a will save.
That's bullshit. It says charm person, and it should work because his character has a 17 in charisma.
I tell him no again, and at this, he got really pissed off and started yelling, telling me to come outside because he wanted to talk with me. I said no and asked him to please leave. He then grabbed me and started to pull me up out of my chair. My brother yelled, telling him not to touch me and to back off. At this point, I was a bawling mess because he was gripping me so hard and his nails were digging in where they started to draw blood. My brother said that if he didn't let go, he would call the cops. After he said this, Kevin let go of me and punched my brother in the jaw. Now, being a footballer, he knew how to take a punch, but also how to kick hard. He pulled back his good leg and kicked Kevin with his steel cap boots right in the family jewels. After Kevin hit the ground and vomited, he told the local game store owner what had happened and called the cops. My brother told his side of the story, and because there were cameras in the store, they saw and heard what happened. They escorted the crying Kevin down to the local station on charges of assaulting a minor and assaulting my brother. Later, we had to go to court, but thankfully, it was pretty much an open and shut case because of the security camera footage. Though the lawyer that was on Kevin's side did try to make the case that my brother went too far with kicking him in the testicles and rupturing both of them. We saw the photos, and yeah, it was not pretty. However, the judge and jury said that it was self-defense and that he did try to defuse the situation. They also then found him guilty of assaulting a minor and assaulting an adult, so he got 14 months, and that was the last thing we heard from Kevin. The aftermath of this is, I haven't played D&D since. One day I might, but I still get a bit anxious about the idea. However, I did get into playing tabletop war games at home with my brother. Well, Kevin definitely sounded like a standard that guy before leveling up to assault. Imagine getting so upset that you can't charm your way into getting into an imaginary character's pants that you would resort to physically attacking a 16-year-old girl. I would say that would take some balls, but apparently Kevin has none. It's a good thing that OP's brother was around when this happened, and that the security footage cleared any charges that he might have gotten for defending his sister. Hopefully, OP can get back into D&D someday, but at least it sounds like she's having fun playing war games with her brother. And thankfully, Kevin won't ever reproduce. Look, I know what happened to him is a serious life-changing injury and all. I'm just busting balls here. I'll see myself out. Secret Revealed? Burn the Character by Reddit user GoreBobs. I'm playing a gunslinger, and the other player who is relevant is playing some kind of magus. The DM had outlined pretty clearly that magic users are actively persecuted, and rewards are offered in every major city for their capture before character creation. The other player has not yet told the group about his magical abilities by session 8 or 9. His character cast abundant ammunition on me during combat, a spell with verbal, semantic, and material components. I asked the DM if I can roll to perceive him casting. I did, and I rolled higher than his check to hide it. Now, my intention wasn't to turn him in right away, or at all, honestly. But my character so much as knowing that he is a magic caster, not even revealing it to his character, caused the other player to completely nuke the character. He immediately began casting spells towards me, causing the rest of the group to subdue him. Once he was subdued, he said something to the effect of,
"Well, I guess you ruined this character,"
and immediately began creating a new one that had personal difficulties with my character for some reason. We followed the plot thread to his old character's execution and got the reward for turning him in. This happened some years ago. I didn't feel like I had done anything wrong at the time, and still don't, but I apologized because of how upset it made him. I still play tabletop RPGs with the other player, and get shit from him time to time for rolling to see magic. I think the other player handled the situation pretty poorly. If you have a secret that you're actively showcasing, you can't expect to reveal it at a time of your choosing. Bad DM? Other player in the wrong? Or should I have not tried to figure it out? Well, this is a bit of a tricky situation. On one hand, it does suck to take away a reveal of a character trait that a player may be planning around. But on the other hand, OP did say that the player was actively casting a spell that could be noticeable. It just boils down to OP deciding to try to see it and rolling better than the player. Though, for that player to then just nuke the character completely would be jumping the gun, I would say. Like OP said, he wasn't planning on turning in the player's character for being a magic user, but just wanted to see if his character would notice. There are so many ways that this could have gone in roleplay, and some awesome moments could have come from it. And, as a commenter pointed out in the post, a perception check shouldn't be visible to other people, as that would be metagaming. So the DM should have never allowed the magic user to use that information as an excuse to attack OP. But I think that the main perpetrator in this story is the magic user, as I think he definitely overreacted. Though I'm honestly curious to hear what you all think, so be sure to let me know in the comments. On to the next one. Creepy DM uses D&D to explore their polyamory, or how to make your entire party uncomfortable. By Reddit user, THATGUY1. So, a few years ago, I met this group at our local comic shop. I started DMing for 3 of us, and eventually we grew to a party of 8. Of those 8, the bard's spouse was brought into the fold, and expressed interest in DMing for the next campaign. Seeing as I needed some time to write for the next one, and a break after running a 3-year campaign, I didn't think there would be any harm. Problem DM, PDM, brings in one girl from another group, under the guise of gaining experience in D&D. I'll admit, I'm a bit naive, but I didn't think anything of it. I would do something similar to introduce new players to the game. However, I was missing vital subtext. Throughout the campaign, PDM gives special treatment to new girl. Items, rerolls, stuff other players would never be allowed to get away with. There were quite a few scenes of flirtatious dialogue, hand-holding, etc. between PDM and new girl out of character, and we were all taking notice. PDM's spouse, the bard, explained that they are in an open marriage, which to each their own. However, it was super problematic that he was in his 30s and she was a naive 19-year-old girl. It was well known at this point that his spouse did not approve, yet he continued. By the time I realized the full scope of the situation, we were ready to have a chat with them about it. This all came to a head when he blatantly asked her out one night after a session, to which she simply and firmly responded with, "Ew." Since then, PDM has stopped pursuing her in any kind of romantic sense as far as I know. Though the problem seems to have resolved itself, I will be keeping a close eye on PDM from now on, especially when I take the DM seat back. Well, I would say that this story is more uncomfortable than anything. I have some friends that are polyamorous, and as far as I can tell, that whole dynamic only works when all parties in the relationships are comfortable with each other. And it seems like this DM didn't care that his wife really didn't like the idea of him going after the new girl. And I can see why. I mean, 19 is technically an adult, but barely. And I can see how her being that old and DM being past his 30s would be a bad situation. Not like it mattered though, since after all the flirtations and hand-holding, new girl responded the way she did. And I can only imagine how awkward the future games were after that. Though, what do y'all think? And before we move on, if you're enjoying the video, I ask that you consider clicking the like button, as it helps the channel out more than you might think. What do you think, Nipsey?
Yes, like the video. I really like this toy.
Thanks, bud. Hopefully they will. Now let's move on to the final story. Wizard Can't Let Anyone Else Have Fun. By Reddit user, Runio the Latias. This has been a cumulative, frustrating game over the last several months, and I felt like it was enough to put out there. Definitely not the worst of the horror stories, and I'm sure the that guy of the situation is a perfectly fine dude outside of D&D. I've almost never talked to him outside of the game, but the way he acts is so obnoxious. I wasn't part of this campaign from the beginning, so I cannot attest to whether or not there was a session 0, but as far as I've been told, the DM was very clear about what the combat and roleplay balance of the game was going to be. During what was more or less part 1 of the campaign, he was apparently just fine, but for whatever reason, when part 2 rolled around, he suddenly became a lot less fun to play with. The characters are me, the DM, Warlock, Bard, Rogue, Paladin, and the problem player, a wizard. The first major incident that I was told about happened a while before I joined. There was a village suffering from an unknown disease that could not be magically cured, and the party discovered that what was more or less patient 0 was holed up in a cave. So, of course, they went to find him, kill him, and use him, in some way I'm not aware of, again, wasn't there, to make a cure for the infected villagers. Now, how could you possibly fuck this up? Even a wild fireball would at least leave some of the necessary things to throw together a cure. They didn't have access to anything that could permanently move him to another plane, so really, they just had to kill him however they could, right? One word: disintegrate. He managed to find the one and only easy way that he could have royally fucked up the situation, and lo and behold, he killed the thing with it, so all that was left at their one and only chance for a cure was now a pile of dust on the floor of the cave. After this, he asked over and over again to roll Arcana so he can figure out a cure, despite there being literally nothing left for him to check. Nothing except for one little thing, which was likely a product of the DM not wanting this to be a complete and total failure, just because of the stupid decision of one player. Some blood and fur on the sword of one of the other party members, only enough to make a few cures, and not nearly enough to cure everyone who was infected, which now included some of their own. Then there's a pretty big gap, a few months I think, between that incident and when I joined. If I were to go into significant detail with every time he's done something annoying since I came in, I'd be writing a full-length novel here. So here's the basic gist of the smaller, less game-impacting moments. Constantly bragging about, essentially, his ability to cast Fireball. He's literally that wizard. It's all he ever casts. Fireball. Fireball. Oh, a firebolt? Another fireball. On top of his bragging, he doesn't even have to worry about us when casting it. I'm not familiar with wizards at all, but apparently he can cast Shaped Fireball, which means he gets all the damage of the spell, with none of the drawbacks. Always acting like we would be nothing without him. If he's not saying something along the lines of,
"You guys would have been totally dead if I wasn't there,"
it's always something like,
"So, how toasty do you want these guys?" Or, "Don't worry, once it's my turn, all of these guys will be ash."
That last one being a particular repeat offender, often after anyone says anything out loud trying to strategize in combat. Finally calling back to the mention of the role-playing combat balance already being discussed clearly. He shows absolutely zero interest in anything going on that isn't fighting. 80% of the time, the only ones engaging in roleplay are me, Paladin, or Rogue. Warlock and Bard are just sort of very quiet people in general though, and they at least engage occasionally. Wizard, on the other hand, quite literally never has anything to say about the situation at hand, unless the subject of killing someone comes up, and take a wild guess at what his number one suggestion is. And, as the cherry on top of that, almost every single session, he doesn't even try to hide the fact that he's doing something else. We've heard video games, anime, seen what he was playing via Discord, through which we play, etc. And constantly letting out loud, obnoxious sighs whenever he's not melting everything in sight. TLDR, Wizard has an inflated ego over his ability to cast Shaped Fireball, talks about how we'd be dead without him, treats us as if we don't matter in combat, and never pays attention to anything else. The DM has talked to him about his behavior a few times, but is hesitant to kick him out, despite his lack of shaping up, due to most of the group having been friends with him for a long time. Though, I think we're all kinda teetering on the edge point, and something's going to get said to him in a much less polite way one of these days if he keeps it up. Yeah, I could see that being as annoying as someone constantly reminding everyone that they have dark vision. Wizard seems to possibly have a slight case of main character syndrome. And I say slight because it seems like he only wants the spotlight when he's setting stuff on fire, but never in the roleplay. Almost like a mute Beavis with a lighter. Not to mention playing video games and watching anime during the game. Hopefully, everyone can come together and have a conversation with Wizard about how he's making the game less enjoyable, instead of someone breaking down in the heat of the moment and saying something out of anger. Communication is the cornerstone of all tabletop RPGs, and while I understand that the DM has tried to, perhaps everyone airing their grievances would have more of an impact, and possibly make him consider that perhaps he's being a that guy. Godspeed, OP. Godspeed. Do you have a story that you would like to be shared in a video? If so, be sure to post it in the dndDoge subreddit, or even hit me up on Twitter. As always, I appreciate all of you, and hope all of your rolls are natural 20s. Until next time.